morning. Thank you very much, Denise. Lovely to have you here. We'll be introducing our guests for today, and our focus has been talking about social impact investments, and there's a lot of things happening in that sector. So we've got a lovely lady here to speak with us today. Been into the world of supported living, supported accommodation for over 14 years, starting from social care, and she's had experience as a therapeutic foster carer. She's going to tell us a little bit more about that. And she's the co-founder of Life Fix Supported Living Solutions. They focus into the education and into the placement and supporting into the conversation now. And Dennis, if you introduce yourself, please.
Yes, thank you, Deji, for having me here today. I'm Denise Searle, and as Deji said, I've been a therapeutic foster carer for over 14 years. And for the past 5 years, I've been involved in the supported living world as well, because my very first foster daughter, we adopted her, and she as an adult now lives in supported accommodation as her early life experiences mean that she has a mental health disability and cannot live independently. Social care side through my therapeutic foster care career, and then through the supported living contact, let's put it like that, with my daughter, and the hurdles we had to jump through to find her a place, which is still the mover because there's nowhere to move her to. That's what put us on the road to finding more supported living homes, and we have a mission to create 50 new supported living homes within 5 years. So that's our mission. I can't do them myself, so we're looking to the world of property investment to invest in them or invest in me, and we'll do them together to reach that goal because it's desperately needed.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the overview. I think let's start from how we all started. A lot of people get into sectors for different reasons, or they go into it one way or the other. So maybe scale back from the early days. I know it's 14 years, and I know you're trying to unpack that quickly. Just give us more insight into how this all started for you, and what is it now that is changed over the years.
Well, for me, I was just being a foster carer, a therapeutic carer, and we found out quickly that your normal foster carers, they place children into family homes with children because they come from a place of trauma and neglect. They come into care to try and help that, but these children have never experienced kindness and care, so they can't settle, and they become confrontational. And what happens is those normal family foster carers just quite honestly go, we can't have this child in our house, and they get moved on. And you hear the stories of foster children being moved even up to 100 times during their time in care, and every move damages that child. And when they get to a point there's no one else who can look after them, they try to put them with therapeutic carers, which is what we are, specialist carers. And we hang on to them and help them manage the world and help them feel it's safe. But some of those children are so damaged, they're not safe even in that environment. And they're the ones who end up in residential care as a rule. What's happening now, the number of foster carers coming into the industry has gone down. The number of children needing to go into care has gone up. Nothing to do with asylum seekers, although they do play a part. It's nothing to do with that. It's just the world is very stressful, and when the stress happens, that's when the children, the parents that are just holding it together can't, and they have to be put into care for various reasons. When they have been very badly damaged. They will go on to needing some support in adult life. But these are just a small fraction. Our daughter, she has a mental health disability caused by her early life experiences, and she could not live independently as an adult. So she went into supported living. And it was that jump into supported living from our care. We did a doctor, so she wasn't in the care system then. But it was that jump into supported living that really lifted up the curtain and showed us how desperate that whole sector is. They're short of, oh gosh, today I think we could provide 162,000 places, and that would be enough. Going forward, I think the National Housing Federation has said we're looking for about 240,000 over the next 20, 25 years. So it's a really growing industry. Previously, children, if they weren't with a foster carer, they were in orphanages. So there was 10, 12, 15, 20 children in one place. Adults with learning disabilities, autism, mental health disabilities were put in institutional hospital style settings. So there were lots of people in one place. But in 2011, there was an undercover reporter for Panorama went into the Winterbourne supported living home for people with learning disabilities and autism, and they found there was widespread abuse and neglect going on in those homes from the start. They were just, it was dreadful. What happened was dreadful. So the inquiry from that came out and said that people with these disabilities they're not mentally ill. I mean, my daughter has a mental health disability, but she's not mentally ill in a psychosis kind of way. She just needs support to live independently. And what the inquiry said was we must not place people in these large institutional places. We should allow them to live in more family-style settings within the community with the support they need to be independent. And that's what's driven this huge need for more supported living places and homes, because whereas once you might have had 20 or 30 people in an institution, they're now staying in either houses on their own with support or maybe with about 4 or 5 other people with support. And that's how it happened.
Thank you very much for that. I know we had a quick chat about your role specifically in this. I know you play two parts in terms of you help people to source providers to source properties from investors.
What I do
on the education part.
Yeah,
let's take the education
absolutely.
part.
Now,
I know just So how do you help educate people from both end of the spectrum, the care providers and then the property investors?
Well, first of all, there's not just a care provider involved in a supported living property. There's usually a commissioning officer, a registered provider who's a housing association. You may have a non-registered provider who's not a housing association on the register of social housing, the government's register. Then they're the providers, the housing providers, but then separately you have the support providers, which are the care companies, and these work together very closely. We also have commission officers from the local authority who commission the support and the property and the care. So these three try to work together, but the commissioning officers are snowed under, to be honest, and find it very hard to communicate. Any investor who's ever had anything to do with the local authority, whether it's planning or something else, knows that the wheels grind really slowly. So the investor is wanting a property, they've got a vacant property or property about to be vacant, they want to fill it quickly. And the providers and the support workers want a property quickly, but act very quickly. So it's really hard to get it all together. And then the providers, care workers, and care providers and support providers and the commissioning officer are not property people. They don't understand what property investors understand. So they want one thing and don't realise that the investors are looking for something else. So what I do, and I do it individually, I've not got a course, although people are calling for a course, so I may well put one together, because providers are looking for a property in the right place. And if it's, I'll talk about the different categories in a minute, but if it's specially supporting houses, quite often they want a detached house, or at most a semi in a quiet, nice residential place. Lots of communal space, so the living room doesn't become a bedroom, the dining room doesn't become a bedroom. They stay as those communal spaces, and actually the more communal spaces the better, which is completely the opposite of what happens in like most investors. They're trying to get as many bedrooms out of a property as they can. The requirements for a supported living home, if you've got a shared home where people share in an HMO style, but it's not HMO, that a single room has to be at least 10.1, I think, square meters, as opposed to your HMO, which is 6.5. So the investors have got one set of rules and the providers have got another. So when I'm talking to each one, and at the moment, as I say, I'm doing it individually, I'm just educating them about what it is and what to expect. It's a very slow process compared to a normal investment property, but the end outcome is so much better and much more rewarding. So that's what I do. I just literally talk to each one and help them to understand what the investor needs, and then help them help the investors understand what providers need. So I'm doing that all the time, because they really don't work together and know what each one wants or needs. So it's interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, that's very true. I think you're almost right. Working with the government sector,
Your average investment property is not really wanted as a specialist supported living.
Yes.
But can I tell you about the different categories of supported living as well? Because investors don't always understand.
Let's go into that.
They're becoming more.
Yeah, please, if you could, expand on the different differences.
There's two main categories, and they're called specialist supported housing and intensive housing management. But within those categories, or subcategories as well. So specialist supported housing is for people who are going to need 24/7 support. They are going to have a condition of some sort that probably will not ever get better. It may, for some people, it may improve, but they're always going to need some support. Yeah. And at the moment, they need 24/7 support. So that's specialist housing. Interim housing management are for your lower support needs. So these can be people who've been in domestic violence refuges, homelessness. Care leavers come in the middle, and I'll explain why in the middle in a minute. They need a lower support need, so they may just have 1 or 2 hours a week, or maybe 1 or 2 hours a day. And then instead of being commissioned by the local authority, they're often run by charities and voluntary organisations. As well as homelessness and domestic violence care leavers, we've got addiction rehabilitation. People get worried about leasing their house to that, but they don't need to be, because by the time they get to be coming into a property like that, they've been through the rehab program. This is the next step. I'm back. Are you back? Yeah, we lost the connection for a second.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, so offenders, things like that. So these people, they need support to maintain the tenancy, to not end up back in the position they were in, whether that's in prison on drugs or alcohol, or being in a bad relationship. And they need support to do that, but that's going to come to an end at some point. So that's intensive. People with some level of autism and some level of mental health disability may reduce, but they'll still need help. So so they're the differences, and it's important to very, very differently. They're both, the rents are paid by housing benefit, but the lower needs generally will only get the housing benefit plus up to about 10%. So these are the categories where you're going to find people placed in an HMO style property and with support coming in. There's not support generally living there 24/7. They may be, in which case they flip over to the 24-hour. And the reason for that is they're quite small. We don't want big houses with 10, 20 people in for the reasons we mentioned before, but also if you've got people recovering from addiction, for example, you don't want too many of those people with the same problems in the same place. Yeah. Same with domestic violence. You don't want them put all in the same place. And they can be in your typical HMO kind of areas, but not the lower end. You want a place that's more aspirational for someone to be able to aspire to. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to live like this? Yeah. So the olden days, they'd all been chucked in like a halfway house, for example. Now we're putting them in a place where they get the right support. It's a nice environment. It may be a terrace. That's okay for this because noise to them isn't so important. But if you go on the supported living side, flip over to that. Noise is really important to these people with learning disabilities and autism, and they can be very, very sensitive to it. So they've either got to be in places that are quieter, not on a main street. The bus routes should be nearby, but not outside the front door. We don't need to be by a train station, but they need access to the doctors and the hospitals. So it's a different environmental settings, different support needs, and they get paid differently. The specialist support needs, it should not be more. In fact, an investor should be trying to make it work at below market rent, and then they'll get more. They'll get more providers because housing benefit. The local authority housing benefit teams are scrutinising every penny, as every single government department and council department everywhere is, because they're just virtually bankrupt. So they're scrutinising everything. You've got to prove you need to pay this money. You've got to prove you can't house that person without paying that money for a rent for a place. Now you've got. Now I'm back. Are you back, David?
Thank you for that.
Yeah, so
yes, I can hear you always.
Funding for specialist supported housing, the rent comes from the local authority housing benefit team, and the funding comes from the local authority funding support team. And again, they are trying to reduce their costs, and their costs have been their funding for specialist supported housing and other supported housing is reduced by over 75% in the past 15 years. So they're trying to support more people with less money, and it's really hard. So the easier you can make it for them as an investor, obviously you've got to make your profit, you've got to cover your costs. But if you're not greedy and you look at the social impact side, work with you. It's the ones who come in and say, how much rent can I get above? I only want to do above market rent and 15% yields or something. They don't, they don't, providers won't work with them. So.
Yeah, so you see a lot of, and I'll get to my next point, you see a lot of advertisements on Facebook. This is becoming like a trend, different sector of it, different targets. You see a lot of advertisements showing you can get 12%, 15% net. We understand this is long lease. We understand this is FRI leases and stuff. How realistic is that from just what you discussed? Because some people know that there's a market rate and there's a type of sector would attract the enhanced housing benefit, because that's what most investors are looking for. So if you could speak to that.
Right. The real well, as I said, there's two. So the lowest needs is just LHA plus 10%. Yeah. And if you stand on scale, if you've got 6 people in a place, that can work. It works as long as you haven't paid too much for your property. In the supported living, especially supported housing, you can get up to the market rent because they're looking for a nice residential house in a nice area, and that costs more. So they need the council have got a statutory duty to house people with support needs.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that they can be housed is in these nice places. You can't put people with learning disabilities or autism or mental health in a crowded terrace house in the middle of a busy road, because they'd be so triggered by all the external noises going on and buses going past and things like that. They wouldn't be able to live there. It becomes dangerous for them. And so they need to be they can share a house, but it'd be really spacious. It wouldn't be like, here's your room and the only other communal space is the kitchen and a little dining table. No, they've got to have big rooms, because when the difference is people in the lower needs, the intensive housing management houses, they are going to move on. It's just a transitory place until they feel better and are able to live on their own without the support. In the other one, in specially supported housing, this becomes their forever home. So it should look like and feel like a forever home. And because they need support needs, you need space for them and you need space for the staff. Staff don't live there, by the way. If they lived there, that could turn into a personal care either. But to get that lovely home in a nice area, in a quiet place with a drive for at least 2, maybe 3 cars, not on the main bus route, not with a bus route outside your door, costs money. And so the local authority know that they have to pay the market rent, or as near to it as possible, to secure that place for those people in need. They could put them in hospitals. They do put them in hospitals sometimes, mental health institutions quite a lot of the time. They put them in elderly care homes, even though they're not elderly. So that's why we're looking for the nice places. But yeah.
I think touching on what you said, I think that's the whole premise of this. The government is doing everything from the hospitals, because it's costing the NHS, it's costing all the parties, the local authority, and everybody involved. It's costing a lot of money. Can't remember the last estimate, but a lot of millions are being wasted by just putting that in. So I think the right direction is getting them into smaller settings that they feel more comfortable with, and it's a win-win for everybody. So talking about a win-win-win solution, what's the best win-win you have seen over time? I mean, we've talked about the local authority, we talk about the investor, but as well.
Yeah, I work with providing children's homes as well, because obviously that's where I've got the knowledge, and I've got the knowledge in children's homes and supported living homes. I've got the provider and the LA knowledge, as well as the property knowledge. I've done property education. But when we did that, myself and my husband, we made a vow right there and then that we weren't going to go into traditional buy-to-lets. We weren't going to do HMOs. We were going to just do this supported living. And we decided to act as brokers for that and use our knowledge for that. And now I've forgotten what you asked me. What's the win-win? So yes, one of I actually did a LinkedIn post on it yesterday, and I changed the names. I called this person Peter, and so Peter worked for a large fostering agency that also had residential children's homes, and he'd worked for them in quite a high capacity for a very long while, and now he wanted to open his own children's homes. Fortunately, he understands all the legislation behind that, because it is, that thick, the rule book on opening a children's home. And he was working with another business partner who was going to fund it. So he was going to run it and get all the staff and do the operational bit, and then build a children's homes business. And the other guy was going to be the funding partner. But the funding partner was looking for the big. He would have liked that, but the guy who I'm calling Peter, he knew that actually the local authority don't want to place that many children in one home. They want to place 2 or 3 people with their 2, like on staff shift, 2 staff members, 2 or 3 children in a home that's like a family home. So they came decided to go their separate ways. And this guy was going to sell his house to fund the project. And I just said to him, look, let's see if we can find an investor for you. And the investor can buy the house and you can lease it off them.
Yeah.
Now, in children's homes, you're almost always going to get market rent. So it's a good deal. You're going to get what the market rent is for that house. The only difference is that it's a bigger house. It's a 4 to 5 bed house with more communal space in a lovely area. You know, not something in the council estate or the high street. So it costs more money. So we're still in the process of that. We're talking to a couple of investors, but he didn't know. He was going to have to sell his house, he thought, to be able to continue with his goal of opening a children's home. And he didn't have any idea that he could work with an investor who would quite invest their money in this project. And actually, one of the investors we're talking to is talking about doing more properties. So, you know, it's looking very positive. We're not there yet, but, you know, for me, just letting this guy know that there are investors out there that he can lease a property from, because they were looking at buying it outright and spending £1 million. So, you know, that for me is a win, to educating the other guy, like the provider, that actually, no, you don't have to spend all your money and limit what you can do. You know, if you work with investors, you can build this quite quickly. And the need is there, believe me, the need really is there for children's
I think the needs cannot be overestimated. That's definitely growing in numbers. One thing I've seen, I mean, from a mortgage brokerage point of view, is that there's a lot of things happening in this sector and a lot of deals happening. A particular model I'm seeing and people are getting interested in is especially for demanding a bit more in terms of, okay, yeah, we would work with you to get maybe the market rate for the property, but at the same time, because they have two elements in terms of supported living, and maybe I'd like you to speak into that. You've got the housing element and you've got the care element. A lot of providers, maybe that are just starting out, are now in looking at a win-win for both parties, where they give a percentage of the profit of the business as a supported living company. How do you see that work for now and for the future?
Oh, I've not actually come across that one, Deji. What? So they're giving, the providers are giving us a proportion of a share of the company to the investor.
Yes. So they set up like a joint venture. Say, I'll bring the property into play, then you provide the care elements, but I'll take market rates on the property itself, but they not get a share of the profit for the business in itself.
Okay. I think that was a little bit risky, because there are actually about 100 supported living companies that are at risk of closure right now. But I put maybe more. There's if you look at my LinkedIn, you'll see a LinkedIn article I posted this week from an article by, was it National? It might have been National Housing Federation, it might be an Inside Housing magazine, but basically there are a lot of people, companies at risk of closure already. So I can't see. It depends on the level of funding. The trouble is the funding comes separately from the local authority, and the provider should never, it's a huge red flag, the provider should never pay the investor more rent by taking some of the funding, support funding money. Yeah, if that's a huge red flag. Even if a provider is paying the investor additional rent but using the support money, it's a dangerous situation, and it's not sustainable, and you shouldn't go there. I've not heard of anybody JVing, but why not? If it works and the money works, why not? So long as that investor has a long-term commitment. We're not looking for unicorn deals. We're not looking for all money out. We're looking to at least leave your money for about 5 years. Yeah. I mean, you may be able to get some of it out, but it would be more beneficial to the investor to leave their money in for 5 years and then take it out of the capital appreciation, rather than keep like after 6 months refinance, because then you've got a property that if the interest rates change, you could be scuppered, literally. And we're not talking about property investment, we talk about people investment. And you should always, whatever you're doing in supported living, have the vulnerable people's needs, the service users' needs at the core of everything you do. So if you do anything that risks their stability and security, I wouldn't go there. I really wouldn't. You asked me earlier, and when we changed tack, you said, what about these people who are guaranteeing X% of the money? Are we guarantee, if you come and join and pay us money, we guarantee you get this much. Again, that's really difficult to predict, because the government is changing all the time how much it's spent, how much it's going to give in terms of rental, and it has to come. The system is for a specialist supported housing. This is where you get most money, like the most market rent usually. For specialist supported housing, there's someone sitting somewhere wanting to live independently. Now they've let a social worker know. The social worker has done an assessment to see what their support needs are and whether or not they would qualify for supported housing. When they do that, and they take that to another team manager or something who approves that, yes, this person should have supported housing, and we think they should have this many hours per week or per day. And this is how the money for the support funding is worked out. And then that all goes to the commissioning officer. And the commissioning officer then puts out his tenders to all the registered and the non-registered providers that they work with, that they're happy to work with, they've got good relationships with, saying, can you fill this? This is a person who needs this. Have you got a vacancy somewhere where this person can go? And someone's going to pipe up and say, yes, I can. And at the same time as doing that, the local authority is arranging for all the support the provider, registered provider support, is arranging a support need. So you've got the care support and the provider separate. So this is going on at the same time, but all that money comes from government. All the money comes from government. So if the government decide to change their percentages or anything, as they are doing, and like I said, they're really scrutinising the funding for support, and they're scrutinising housing benefit. And if they decide to lower anything, you cannot guarantee it, because you don't know how many people are coming through from the social workers at the top of your funnel, if you put it that way. And you don't know how much the government are going to continue to be paying. Now, they have to pay it, they have to, but they're looking for more effective models. And one of the most effective models that I've found, that I'm kind of moving towards myself now, is to, instead of an HMO where they're all living together in one house, get a big HMO and convert that into individual flats. It can be studios for the lower needs, but flats for the specially supported living. So they've all got their own independent space. They're not living in each other's pockets. They can eat and cook in their rooms if they want and they are able, with support, or they come and there will be a communal space there, and there'll be a staff space there. So you'll have these people living independently in their own self-contained places, but there's actually always staff on site and always a communal space that they can use to come together as well, so they're not isolated. And that seems to be a model that the local authorities are welcoming, because it means they only need one support team, so that funding comes right down. They're still funding the same amount of people and their rent, but the support needs comes down, and that's always been the crux. And I know of a couple of companies that are charging like 20 grand, people for 20 grand to say you're going to get a share of this. And it's not guaranteed, because it's a people thing, and people do funny things. You don't know there's going to be 100 people coming through from social services every week. So, you've got to look at the whole process and not just that little bit of, this is how much money I can get.
Thank you. You mentioned about your LinkedIn post on providers. There's a risk, and that's a big factor. Most investors need to think ahead. So how do an investor, property investor that wants to get into this space, how do they vet providers. And in line with that, in one of your LinkedIn posts I saw in the group chat that we are in, I'm just saying that that's a Kent property mix. There's something you talked about, commissioners and non-commissioners. So two questions in one. How do investors vet to make sure that they are working with the right providers? And maybe explain a little bit for people that don't have an understanding what it means to work with a commissioned and non-commissioned provider.
Okay, we start with that one first. So with the commissioned providers, there is a list. You go on u.gov or gov.uk, whichever, and ask for the list of registered social housing providers. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's all your housing associations. So it's not just the specialist supported living. You've got your council housing in there and other big housing associations that just house people, not people with needs. So, but amongst some of those are the specialist ones. And they're all housing associations. That's the thing to remember, is the providers, the registered and non-registered. No, the registered are housing providers. Sorry, are housing associations, and they're on this government list. Now, to get on that government list, it takes a couple of years to demonstrate that the housing association financially, repairs, tenant care, all sorts of things. It takes a couple of years, and also they have to have a lot of money in the bank to be able to sustain long void periods. They have to demonstrate all that just to get onto that list. So they're commissioned. Now, non-commissioned can be private companies that start up. They can be care companies. They're often charities, trusts, and voluntary organisations. Yeah. So like homelessness, or just support, But if you are looking yourself, the council will always want to go to commission providers.
Yeah.
No, right? Council like to go to commission providers because it's easier and they're certain that they're getting the right housing. But they like non-commission because, let me tell you, if you're a non-commission provider and you claim housing benefit from the local authority, the registered providers the council can claim back 100% of the rent they pay to a registered provider, which is why they want to let to them. That's the way around. So I get my words muddled like that. If it's non-commissioned, they can only claim back 60%. So the local authorities want to lease to the registered providers because they claim back 100% of the rent they've paid from the government. The government will pay that back. But non-commissioned is only 60%. Yeah. If you want to know you've got a good provider, you have to really interrogate them and find out how long they've been operating for. Generally speaking, I won't work with a provider that's not been working less than 3 years, operational less than 3 years, and can show me a history of referrals from local authorities, and also look on the finances and make sure they're able to maintain a void. Ideally 5 years. I like to work with providers that have been going for 5 years. What's happening now is, because the local authority are not wanting to refer people to these, the non-commissioned ones, because they can't claim back all the money. And the commission ones haven't got all the spaces, haven't got enough space. So what they're doing is, non-commissioned providers are working with providers, and for a fee, they can also almost become part of that company. So they can then get those referrals come through, and then this commissioner, this person will pay non-commissioned, pay the registered provider a fee, to be able to use their name. But it does mean that then the council can claim back all the money, and that's what they need to do. That's what they're trying to do, because then so many councils are on the verge of bankruptcy, if not bankrupt already. So you've got to find a way of carrying out their statutory duties and still being able to afford to do it. So, you know, they've got to try and make their money back. Everybody is under this impression that registered providers and providers are making a fortune. And the fact is they're not, you know, just like investors, the regulations are even steeper for them than they are for investors. And then they've got all the staffing costs as well, etc. So you know, the care companies have the staffing costs, the housing people have the maintenance costs and repairs and everything. And they're not making a fortune. So there's this misbelief, really, you know, that they are, so we can ask these higher rents, and they're just not. They really are not.
Yeah.
And then they're trying to work with housing, sorry, with local authorities that are bankrupt anyway. So it's kind of my firm advice would be try your hardest to come below market, for specially supported housing. Try your hardest, if you possibly can, to come below market value in what you ask for. But for intensive housing management, just accept LHH plus 10, but look at it instead of renting one room or renting it as an HMO style, and you're going to get LHA plus 10 for 6 rooms, and your figures usually work out much more beneficial. Because the biggest bonus of this supported living is that you always should be asking for a FRI lease, so a full repair or insured lease, so that whoever your lease is with is responsible for all the maintenance and all the voids and all the everything. Now, sometimes they negotiate some void payments into the lease, and that's acceptable. But the main maintenance and everything should be for the provider, and the landlord only pays for the any structural damage. Again, negotiable. Sometimes they'll say, can you please cover the boiler? Some may say, we're not going to take that on, but there are ways of mitigating that using insurance. I don't know the detail, I can't remember it, but there's a way of mitigating the taking on the maintenance.
Yeah.
You basically bat it back to LAs, but there's something else going on in the middle.
Yeah, so that's fine. I think you're maybe talking about the boiler insurance and maintenance, which you can pay a fee for. That's good. Yeah. So just for investors that might be wondering, okay, why should I be getting lower or getting market rates and stuff? I think one of the key highlights, just to highlight that really, is if you talked about the FRI, which means that you're not, as a landlord, you'll be used to the costs of maintaining the property, the cost of owning the property, and every other fix. And yes, we say property is a passive, not usually the case, but with leases like this, you can get into more passive situation where most of the things is managed by you, a letting agent fee and all of that. So you're getting the money net, and more importantly, you're getting a longer duration. So maybe for 3 years, maybe for 5 years. And usually, if they work with you for 2 years or 5 years, there's always maybe a possibility of them wanting to continue because they have that relationship with you. So
generally speaking, a provider will always want to continue with you unless they found that it's in the wrong location, or they found that the house just isn't suiting their needs. You know, but on the whole, if it suits their needs, they will always want to continue, always, because it's so hard to find somewhere. Why do they want to do? What's the best thing for them? It's security and peace of mind. You can, once you've signed with an investment property, let's say you've got an HMO, you do your refurb, you get your built in, and you do your refurb, and you let it out. Your problems start the day you let that property out. Now, with supported living, you don't get those problems. There are no voids, there are no tenancy issues, there are no legislation actually in terms of the Renters Reform Rights Bill. Tenant, you are leasing, it's a commercial lease, so you don't have to worry about the Renters Rights Bill. You are guaranteed your money, it is paid by the local authority. There is a caveat, and that is that the providers have got to pay it to you, because it doesn't come straight. It usually goes to the provider and then straight to you. No one's. You're in mortgages, Deji. You know that you have to pay a higher interest rate for these specialist mortgages. And there's a lot of conversations and forums and things going on now to try and get rid of that additional percentage, because it's seen as a high risk strategy. It's not a strategy anyway, it's a housing model. But it's seen as high risk. And the reason mortgage providers see it as high risk is because if a provider defaults on the mortgage, or if the landlord defaults on the mortgage, they would have to evict vulnerable adults. And nobody wants to have that. It's professional reputation. They don't want that to stop and put the rate up a little bit. However, at a convention I was at last year, I asked the mortgage, the lenders, it wasn't just mortgage companies, brokers there, but lenders were there. And I asked them, I said, so how many times has a landlord defaulted on a supported living mortgage? And the answer was none, never ever been done. Because it's such a good, that lease, if you've done your lease right, it's hands off. Let's say it's a 5-year lease, you don't need to even visit that property for 5 years if that's what you had written into the lease. And you can just go away and know that you're getting your money all the time. It's come from government and it is guaranteed from government. It is so passive. It's the most passive of passive, strategies, if you want to use that word, out there for investors. But you're doing something good. You are housing really vulnerable people, like my daughter, who cannot live independently. If she was to live independently, she may end up being arrested and put in jail just because she doesn't understand the world in the same way that you and I understand the world. Nothing wrong with her, apart from she just can't understand. She needs that support. So there are people with learning disabilities who will never be able to manage on their own. There are people with autism who are never going to be able to manage on their own. You're doing such a fantastic thing by providing them with a long-term stable home. On the other side, or the shorter term housing, it's needed so much, and in our very stressful society we live in now, it's becoming more needed. It's just, you're doing something fantastic for society. It gives you a glow in your heart and a feel-good factor. And it's good to know that out of your investment, you're actually doing some good for the society that you live in as well. And that's wonderful, It's really wonderful.
100%. I think that's right. So talking on the mortgage side of things, like you said, in our earlier chat, this is not like a new thing. Yes, it's coming into the news. Everybody on social media is talking about it. But I've had clients that have been in this sector and had mortgage for many years. So the good thing is a lot of lenders are becoming more interested in these sectors. So we're seeing a lot more products coming in to support this sector specifically. So, and a lot of barriers that used to be the case has been taken down. So it's a lot easier now. And I tell people, speak to the right broker. They'll be able to find you the right solution. Don't make the mistake of trying to commit mortgage fraud by not doing the right things. So, supported living, supported lenders looking into this space. So, so I would encourage investors to not think it's not possible for me to get a mortgage. That's why I'm not investing in this. You're making changes. You're making impact to the people you're housing, and to do it right, you can definitely get the right mortgage. So that's not to be the concern alone.
Many more lenders entering the market for supported living, and the rates are coming down as well. There's less gap between a buy-to-let. But you touched on there, don't commit mortgage fraud. Really important for landlords to understand that they do need to have specialist mortgage and they need specialist insurance as well. You cannot get by on a buy-to-let, because if one tiny little thing goes wrong, you will have your mortgage withdrawn and your insurance. If there was a fire, just an ordinary fire, not someone set a fire, but an ordinary fire that happens to other people, or something else was broken, they wanted to claim through the mortgage, it would come to light that there are people with support needs living there. It's being run by a supported living provider, and you would have your insurance drawn and probably would not be able to get reinsured because you've lied.
Yeah.
And actually, and they are linked to the mortgage providers and the mortgage lenders, and your mortgage can be withdrawn as well overnight. So it's really, really, really important to do it properly from the beginning.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, in short terms, it's not worth the trouble.
No.
And yeah, so yes, that's the truth. Okay, thank you for putting some light to that. I think, I mean, what advice would you give to landlords who want to enter this space and they want to do it ethically, they want to do it effectively? What would you speak to them? How would you encourage them to come in? What are the pros and cons that they need to be aware of as well, so that it's just not one-sided?
Okay. If they want to start in supported living, they need to, if it's a landlord who's already got a property that they're trying to, that it's going to be vacant and they want to pass it on to supported living, they need to understand that they're going to have to do some work to it. It's got to be a modern, well-equipped place. You don't have to provide white goods or everything, but you're not looking for quality materials here. You're looking for good quality stuff. These are people's homes. They're not transitory, unless it's the lower end supported living. But as I said, we want to provide something aspirational. We're trying to keep people off the streets, out of jail, not on drugs, stuff like that. So we want to create an aspirational place. It doesn't be top notch. It's just got to be good. For specialist supported living, it should be much better, actually, and very durable, because some people with autism and learning disabilities can sometimes just be aggressive in their behaviour. They can't help, it's part of their condition, and things can get broken. So you want robust things in there. If you've just got a buy-to-let house, all your rooms, all your bedrooms for the residents need to be above 10 square metres, as I mentioned before. So you need to take that into account, apart from the one, which would be for a sleep-in staff, sleep-in, two separate words, not one, for specialist supported housing. So that's some things you're going to have to put in, fire doors, etc. If it's for more than one person, you're going to have to put in the whole fire doors and the full integrated fire alarm systems. Depends on the property and who's going in there. If it's just a single person going in there, you don't need to do that. What they need to, the pros are just remember that the work comes up front, and once you've done that work and that lease is signed, you don't have to do anything. Your money just comes in, and that's the big bonus. But the cons are you must look out for good providers. That you don't want to be working with a provider who's only just started. Which sounds horrible, because how do you get going if you've only just started? You can start with ones who've only just started if they've got a background in the care and support system, or if they've been supported by a registered provider. But there are, how can we put it, there are less than honest people out there. There are landlords out there now, investor and landlords out there now going, oh, I think I'm going to be a supported living provider and I'm going to get supported living people in. They haven't got a clue about the regulation. You want to know that these providers understand the regulation. They're CQC registered. If it's care leavers, they are got to be CQC and Ofsted registered. If it's children's homes, they've got to be Ofsted registered. So you're looking for the registrations, you're looking for their policies, you're looking for their bank account. You want to know that they can manage if there's voids. So you just really good due diligence, and know you want someone with a good, what they call a covenant, with a good background, really. But yeah.
Thank you very much. we're rounding up and just wanted to put some numbers to this. So maybe, I mean, I know part of your work is helping people and bringing all those relationships together. I'd like you to give us a live scenario where you've got a property. I know you gave some highlight before, but for people that are listening and would want to work with you or want to get into this sector, maybe if you could paint it in a more elaborate way, what do you help your clients to do in this space, and how, I mean, maybe we'll take how they can contact you and all of that, because I definitely believe what you're doing is fantastic.
Thank
And
you.
the numbers are there. There is a lot of more need in this sector. I know I've worked with a few providers, but there is still a lot more, especially if we start bringing in the property investors into this space. So please paint the picture how you help people, and maybe just give us a feel about how they can get in touch with you.
So the first thing I do, if an investor or landlord contacts me, and they say I want to buy a house for supported living, I say don't buy a house yet. We have to start with the provider. So I go out, and a lot of my work is going out and contacting and getting in touch with providers to find out what their needs are in their area, linking it to their local housing policy to find out what the policies are for that area. And then I go to the providers and say, right, this is what I do. I work with the investors and landlords, and we can meet your local housing policy needs by leasing properties from these people. And then I let the providers know what I do in terms of educating the investors. And they will tell me what property they want, or what property they need, and where they need it, and when they need it. Now, sometimes, or usually, they want it yesterday, so I have to help them understand that's usually not going to happen. There's not an empty house just sitting there waiting for them. So we give them realistic expectations. Realise you do all your work up front, and I explain the sort of properties that the investors want in that area, where they are. I will go and source properties if I need to. They may have the property sitting there or about to become vacant anyway. That would be fantastic, but it rarely happens because, as I said before, your typical investor property is not. Your typical investment property is not your typical supported housing property. And then I just go about the method of just like matching the properties. So I'll do some sourcing, I'll find some properties, I'll run those properties first, buying the property if the provider doesn't want it. So I run it by them. We get their okay that they think this would be absolutely fine with these modifications, or it could be fine just modernised, done up as it is. Because I'm always thinking of the investor and thinking, well, they want to build in some equity. They want to have something a bit run down, do it up, get a better value, so they've got some equity set in there already. So I'm thinking along those lines. Although, if we're thinking longer term, sometimes it pays to buy something that's already done up. It can save you a fortune because you're getting that income straight away, and then you'll get that income secured for the next 5 years. So I'm working like parallel. I'm working between the providers, I'm working between the investors, trying to match them all. When I get a match, it's a case of negotiating the price, with like any other ordinary deal, negotiating that and getting it through, but getting the leases right. So at that point, I will be once we've got what's called an agreement for lease, or we get the it's not the supporting letter. There's another word. Once we've got that, and then like that agreement in principle there, that's when I invoice, because I've done my work. I've matched you. You've agreed. We've got the property. We've secured the property, and that's when I invoice you for my work. If you want me to take it all the way through, so it's completely hands off for you, I can do that as well, and go all the way through to the end. If someone just decides to pull out of it, I've done what I said I was going to do for you. Doesn't seem to fall through anyway, because there's a lot of work put in up front to get that right property. I will never ever show a provider a property that I don't think meets the requirements ever. I just won't do it because they're inundated. They've got people, they've got landlords phoning them up, hundreds of landlords a day, get big phone calls and emails from them. I've got the perfect property, and it's so far from the perfect property. It's unbelievable. Sure. It doesn't take much to make it the right property, but it's got to be right. And they can't go, oh, well, it's because the local authority can't run and check it, you know, just like they do in HMOs, etc. So it's a lot of legislation. As long as they understand, the investor, that it's slow up front, but once it's done, it's done. That's good, and that's how I work.
Thank you very much. Thank you for putting that out there. And I know people that will be interested in supporting this sector will get in touch with you. We'll put your LinkedIn and all possible contact details in the show notes as well, so that people can reach out to you.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's been a wonderful conversation with you. I know there's so much about this we not touched, like I said, it might need another section, because there's just so much. I know people are only thinking, oh, I can make money from this, but there's so many sectors, there's so many categories of these and what happens to them. I know intentionally I didn't ask you questions about the regulation side of things because I don't want this to be too long and stuff. So there's still a lot for people to be aware of, a lot of people to learn. Education, like you said, is one of the things you provide in this space. So please link up with yourself. LinkedIn, I know you. When I see it, sometimes I read your article and I said, yes, I hope a lot more people are taking this on board. Yes. So thank you for spending your time today. I know you been very, very useful on this, and we appreciate you. Just for the last question before we round up, we've talked about where we are now. We talked about things happening in this sector. I just wanted to look ahead and like, what's the vision for your company, Life Fix, and the future of supported housing? What would you one policy change to support vulnerable groups? What would that be?
Oh, wow. Well, as I said already, my mission is 50 new houses, not placements, but houses, because one house could have a few placements in it, in 5 years. That's my mission. Policy. Oh, gosh. There's a new regulatory oversight bill just coming in for supported living. It's called SHORA, so Supported Housing Oversight Regulatory something, I can't remember. And it is doing pretty much what the Renters' Rights Bill was doing for landlords in terms of ensuring those properties are of good quality and the right sizes and meeting all the needs. And from that point, it's great, but it's going to bring in a licensing scheme. Again, I don't disagree with that. I just don't think it should be so expensive that it stops people, the people trying to do something good and provide these homes from doing it. But there is, it's not fully enacted yet, but it's still a possibility that the outcome of it could reduce the number of non-commissioned providers. And as we mentioned earlier, that's where I said to you, I think they should recognise that the actual non-commissioned, the good non-commissioned providers that have been going for years, they've got relationships with local authorities, they've got, I don't know, let's say 10 properties, and they're housing 50 people. They're as valid and as important as the non-registered. And if you took away their ability by strangleholding them with policy and red tape to house those people, you've suddenly got the same problem we're seeing in the rented sector, a lack of housing for the people who really, really need it. But whereas I know people may end up homeless in the private rental sector and end up sofa surfing or staying back with their mum and things, stuff like that. But in the supported housing, they can't manage on their own. You know, they cannot manage on their own. So they're either going to end up in hospitals or in prison, or or completely unsuitable places. So I would urge that that act, as it's going through in the consultation process, I think it's just finished. That they actually really look at that carefully and understand that you don't need to be a commission provider to be doing a really good job, and put some safeguards in there so that they don't get pushed out by regulation.
Thank you very much, Denise. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your story as well. I think one of the things that work in this sector is having the feel yourself, and you've been through this. So thank you for sharing so much on here. This is not the end of the conversation. Please link up with Denise and LinkedIn, especially. There is, I believe, there's a daily post. There's a daily post. So if you find her on LinkedIn, please let her know you're interested in this space.
And if I can ask you, if you are an investor who would really love to get into this space and is willing to invest in a supported accommodation, supported housing accommodation, or a scheme, then get in touch with me, and I can get you into my. I'm not got it yet. I'm just building the WhatsApp group. I've got the investors, but they're all kind of written down in a book or on spreadsheet. So I just need to get them all into a WhatsApp group so that I can send you those opportunities as they arise. So I would go to the investor and say, the provider, and say, this is the property, this is what you've asked for, this is what I've got. Are you interested? When they say yes, we then come to the investor and say, the provider is interested in this, who's interested? And then the investors can easily let me know who's interested in investing in that property. Yeah, so just make it easier for them.
Definitely. We will talk also on a few possibilities on how we can support LifeFix and bring some things your way. So definitely, the more we collaborate in this space, the more we can increase the numbers of people that get support, and we can make bigger impacts. The way I see this is just not the housing, it's a social impact and the life of people you are changing, and everybody involved in that, the staff and everybody. So yeah, so that's the thing. Thank you for. I wish I can keep you on, but we'll keep it short. Yeah, we'll keep this short, and hopefully we'll see you again. Maybe talk differently, or there's a lot more to say anyway. But really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. It's been very, very educative. It's been very, very full of steps and clarity for people loaded with the truth. A lot of people are getting the wrong vibes, thinking, oh, you can be a millionaire just having this one supported living and that will change your life. But you've put into perspective how this really works, because you have experienced this yourself. So thank you